Hi all, so it's Tuesday, you're getting ready to work on peer review, but I want to take a couple minutes to set up peer review for this class, to talk about why we even bother doing it and how to do it in a really productive way. I'm sure many of you have peer review horror stories from other classes where peer review was either useless, a waste of time, used just as a filler in the middle of the semester, or maybe even one of your peers were really mean in what they wrote back and so you're kind of devastated afterwards, or maybe your peers didn't write anything useful at all and they just said it was good and then you ended up getting a C on the paper, right? All of those are frustrating experiences that I'm sure many of us have had with peer review. But in this class, I want to set up some guidelines to make sure that peer review works really well, because ultimately peer review is really important. So learning how to do it well has just a huge payoff. So first I want to talk about why we do peer review. And first of all, we do it to get feedback on our own work. There's a popular saying that a C paper is an A paper turned in too early. So what I want you all to think about is this as an opportunity to get feedback on your work, to turn your C kind of paper, your rough draft, into an A paper. And the same goes for speeches, right? So getting feedback after you've taken your paper as far as it can go on your own, your classmates can help you figure out how to take that 3 steps further. And it's that outside influence, those other people who can poke and prod and see your paper differently, that can really pay off in really great ways. Secondly, peer review helps us talk through challenges and solutions. This helps you get outside of your own head. And I've had this experience many times when I do peer review of my own papers, my own professional journal articles. My colleagues help see things that I didn't see when I wrote the paper. They either see holes in my argument that I need to fill, things that I skipped over that I thought were obvious to my audience, but they're like, nope, we need you to fill in those gaps. And then my response is usually, oh, that's an easy gap to fill in. So in that way, our peers, our colleagues can help us spot problems that oftentimes aren't super hard to fix because we know our own speech, our own paper so well. So our colleagues can help us brainstorm solutions to the challenges that we have. It's absolutely critical. The third reason we do peer review is to maintain an audience-centered approach to our communication. So I want you all to remember that I'm not your audience for these speeches. Your classmates are your audiences. And I'll grade your speeches, and the grader will help me grade your speeches, thinking about how well you communicate to your audience. But that means your classmates are really great sources of information about how well you do communicate to an audience, right? So if the people in your peer review group don't track one part of your speech, they find it confusing and kind of missed what you were saying, that's great information to have because they're your audience and you want to make things as easy and clear for your audience as possible. And admittedly, maintaining an audience-centered approach as a speaker can be really hard. You think you've laid everything out clearly. You think you've made the argument in the best possible way, but your audience is still missing something. So it's hard and often painful to hear those things, but your audience is what really matters. It doesn't matter if you think it's clear. Communication is about making that connection to your audience, to another person, getting your ideas out of your head into someone else's. So you have to always be thinking about ways to make things clear for your audience. And sometimes you gotta reformulate, add a couple extra sentences, and brainstorm new ways to make things clear for your audience. But then lastly, number 4, we do peer review because it's what professional writers, communicators, and employees do at work at all levels. So even professional scholars like me, I have peer review on a regular basis. I have a group of colleagues who I meet with once a month to read each other's papers. Sometimes it's my paper, sometimes it's someone else's. And then we send those papers off for publication. So peer review is critical even when you're an experienced writer. But even when you're a professional writer, a fiction writer or a nonfiction writer, they use peer review as well. John Green always talks about the group of writers that he met with in New York to share ideas, to get together to write write together. And at work, you're always going to be writing in teams, trying to maintain that audience-centered approach. So peer review is something that you're going to do for the rest of your life. It's a great way to get feedback on your work to make sure you change that C paper to an A paper. So it's something that we want to make sure that we get good at now and that we use at this moment to make our speeches as good as possible. So if that's why we do peer review, we need to set some guidelines for making peer review productive, useful. So let me outline the peer review process for you a little bit. And all of this, of course, is written on your handout, but I just want to talk through it a little bit to make sure it's clear for everyone. So the way the peer review process is going to break down is it's going to break down in 4 steps, and you're going to do 2 different rounds of this with 2 different groups. So step 1, this is where you tell everyone in your group, I had a really hard time with my introduction, or I don't know if my solution is convincing enough. Do you think it is? Or I know that my transitions are rough. I need help brainstorming how to make those better. This is the part where you tell your audience, tell your 2 reviewers, the 2 things that you really want some help on. Whether that's, is this effective, or I know this isn't effective, I need help brainstorming ways to make it better. Either of those works really well. But make sure you choose 2 things to tell your audience, to tell your 2 reviewers what you'd like particular help on. Then step 2, as the speaker, you perform your speech. Here you don't need to worry about delivery, so don't worry about eye contact, don't worry about vocal variety. Here just focus on conveying the ideas that you want to convey to your audience. So you certainly don't need to stress out about maintaining eye contact the right way or even standing up. Just deliver all parts of your speech as you would during the actual performance. And then maybe hand those paper copies of both your speech and your PowerPoint slides to your reviewers so that they can follow along as well and see how those slides match up nicely to what you're saying. So at this point, you should have a solid rough draft of your speech that you're able to perform. Step 3 is the actual peer review discussion. And so here I want you to spend 20 to 25 minutes discussing the speech with your 2 reviewers. And certainly this can be an oral discussion that unfolds, but I want you to fill out the 3 worksheets that everyone will have a copy of, focusing on the quality of arguments, which you can see in the rubrics, right? As well as focusing on the clarity of the arguments and of the speech overall, and lastly, the slides, the visual aspects of the slides. So it's 3 main areas that provide some really specific questions that I want everyone in the group to answer, and then the basis of those questions can help provide feedback for the speaker. So as you're discussing, going through worksheet by worksheet from the beginning to the end, worksheet 1 to worksheet 3, you're discussing as a group, talking about commonalities that you found, as well as maybe points where your reviewers disagree. And that's okay. As a speaker, you'll have to kind of figure out what to do with those points of disagreement. Not all audience members will have trouble tracking the same parts, but do try to fix as much as you can for every audience. The only hard part is when people are contradictory, right? But that's part of being a speaker and part of solving these things. So hopefully you walk away from that peer review having lots of ideas. So then, step 4, so clearly on this worksheet I have 2 step 3s, so sorry you all. So step 3 is peer review. Step 4 should be the post-review conference. This is where I want the reviewer to verbalize their comments to the writer, so you're just kind of summarizing the 2 biggest things that you'd like to see the writer improve on, and then I want the writer to summarize the 2 biggest comments that they heard across all reviewers. Whether that's, it sounds like you really liked the introduction, but had difficulty understanding the solution. That might be one way to phrase that. And then lastly, step 5, turn in the worksheets to Jenna. I want to see these worksheets to kind of see evidence of the peer review that you did, to make sure that you guys took it seriously, that you really did it in a way that it had good payoff for each of the speakers. And so turning in these worksheets is how you get participation credit for today and participation and credit for participating within the peer review. All right, so that's the peer review process. But I have a couple guidelines that I want you all to keep in mind as you're working through this process. And first of all, it's work together. The goal of peer review is to exchange ideas, not just papers. You want to be talking through these things. And certainly, part of the benefit of having a small group like that, of 2 reviewers and a speaker, is that hearing one person say one thing may spark something else in another. I've had that happen in my own peer review groups, that one person will say, this part didn't feel quite right, and someone else will say, oh, I had the same problem. I think it was this. And then the first person says, you're exactly right. That's exactly it. So helping your fellow reviewers articulate what's going on, articulate what they're looking for as audience members, and articulate ideas for solutions. So you want to be able to talk to each other. You don't have to be definitive. You don't have to say this is totally exactly like this, or this is the solution you must take. You can talk really freely and offer a number of suggestions and kind of process it all together. So talk to each other, work together. Secondly, focus on the big picture. So obviously, pay special attention to the notes, to the questions that I add on the worksheet, but keep in mind that you're spending the majority of your time on big issues like organization, evidence, central argument, and introduction. You're not getting bogged down in surface details. So I don't want you to get focused on word choice, phrasing, or delivery style and vocal fillers. That's not what we're focusing on for this peer review. We could do that in a different one, but here we're focused on really the ideas, the construction of the speech. So stay focused on those big issues rather than the surface details. And then lastly, number 3, I want you to keep in mind, give constructive feedback. Don't just rubber stamp your partner's speech saying, oh, I like everything, it's great, because no one's going to get 100% on their speeches. I can tell you that right now. We all have things to improve on. Every speaker can use feedback, and every speaker can benefit from revision. So if you're the reviewer who's just rubber stamping saying, I like everything, you're not doing your job as a reviewer, and you're not doing your job as an audience member. Be critical, be open, be engaged. Those are all ways to help give constructive feedback. And then I want you to speak as an audience member when you comment on these speeches. Use first person. Describe your experience as an audience member. For example, say, I had a hard time following this section. You don't want to say something like, don't do this. Talk about what the effect was on you as an audience member, whether that's clarity, whether that's a question that you had as an audience member that didn't get answered, whether that's a distraction, whether that's there wasn't enough evidence in that section to be convincing for me. So it's staying focused on your role as an audience member and using first person. That's how you can give kind but also critical and constructive feedback. So that's what I want you all to think about for the peer reviews. And I want you to know that I take peer reviews seriously and that I expect you all to do the same. They're super helpful. They're beneficial for the rest of your life. So I encourage you all to take this seriously, use this time wisely, and then if you still have questions, if you walk away from a peer review saying, my reviewers helped me identify a problem, but I'm still stuck, I still don't know how to solve it, feel free to shoot me an email. We can talk through that and brainstorm solutions too. So good luck with the peer review. I'm excited to see what you all come up with and how you see each other's speeches. I think it'll be really beneficial. You'll enjoy it, and it'll be a really useful use of your time. All right, good luck. See you later.